Hey, everybody, this is Alan Ting, TEDx speaker, number one bestselling author. Hey, welcome to another episode of Expert Series Interview. And today I'm super excited about this interview. In fact, I was just telling the person I'm interviewing here, I couldn't sleep last night because I'm so excited about this topic. Topic is what every single parent that I know of, they all want, is how to raise strong and confident kids. Because I've been hearing a lot of parents, like, especially with this one client I'm working with right now, she's like, I have growth mindset, but I just I can't transfer this knowledge to my kid. And he doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't want to read. He doesn't want to try a basketball. He just seems like in his self-helpless mode, right? So today I have my dear friend, Felix Lin. First title is the CEO. The second title, he's also the CIO, known as Chief Inspiration Officer. For 20 years, Felix has built and facilitate cultures and building training base and executive coaching from Google, from Draper University, 500 Startup, Goldman Sachs, Tony Robbins, and one of my favorite events is Global Leadership Summit, who he also facilitated as well. This is where we bring over 240 kids from all over the world, from Asia, Europe, from Africa, obviously United States, right? And he's been running this for quite some time, and that had an honor and a privilege to be working with him. Saw him at firsthand. I just love about this man because he gives so much from his heart and asks nothing in return. And this is one of the most authentic and genuine human beings I ever met. So welcome, Felix.
Wow, thanks, Alan. That's quite an intro. Here's the thing, of course, you're very inspirational as well. Watching your transformation over the years and seeing where you are at this point is wonderful. And just like I would never have imagined myself here. There's no inkling in my background that I should be somebody that's talking about what we're talking about, leadership. I should have been a lab rat as a physics guy and just working behind the scenes, doing math, just working on imaging for MRI. That's where I was going. And I had great leaders, right? And that's one of the big things about parenting is we want to be great leaders, for sure.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and dive into the question about how to raise strong and confident kids. What are some common signs that a child is struggling to feeling of inadequacy when they're not feeling enough?
If there's any acting out, I mean, it's just as simple as that. If the acting out is a longer term thing, right? Every now and then, anybody gets upset. Our goal is to understand the upset, be able to overcome it as human beings. We all have our own process. If the behavior becomes more and more consistent, then you definitely know something's going on. It's always a reaction to the behaviors of the parent. In a sense, if you think about an organization, the roadblock is always the CEO. Everything comes back to the CEO. It doesn't matter what's going on, the CEO leads the way. Same with the parents. So if my child is like, and I have two kids, right? So I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. And if there's any kind of consistent behavior issue that's happening, that's on me, not on them. I've got to figure out what it is that I'm doing that they're reacting and why has it gone so long and find a way to interrupt that behavior. Parents get really frustrated and they start doing even more. They start yelling more. They start doing more grounding. They start like trying to correct the behavior. And it's not going to work. It just won't. I've done it.
I think we've all done it, right?
Yeah, we've all done it because we get frustrated. And when we act in that frustration, that's when we make wrong decisions.
That's a really interesting you say that. I'm not perfect, even though I'm also a parenting coach. There are times where why can't you just listen to me? Get off the iPad. It's funny that you mentioned that. Tell us more about that because I'm really intrigued. Because here's a concept, right? The concept is when our kids are acting up, when they're misbehaving, not just one day, but more like repeated offense. So what you're saying is it's not really us. What's missing?
Every force, there's a reaction, right? Instead of thinking that it's on them, I have to change the thinking, like what am I contributing to this situation? And that's a rare thing to happen when we're frustrated. Because in the end, for almost all parents, we want our child to live a better life. We realize that we only have 18 years with them until they go out into the world. And actually, it's actually less. If your kids are in public school, it's actually a lot less. Right? So you probably have till about 12. And by 12, as soon as they start getting all that peer pressure, that takes over. I think there was a lot of great studies about it, but the peer pressure overcomes your parenting. If we set them with the right values and stuff, then they'll carry that through. They will make mistakes, but at the same time, we have that limited amount of time and there's this scarcity thing in our heads that we have to get this through to them before this date. It's interesting that we want to have really creative kids, and yet we, a lot of us will at times will try to control everything they do, right? Do it this way, only this way. If you don't listen to me, this is what's going to happen, right? And so it's fascinating And I realized I was doing it myself. And I was like, wow, it's conditioning from art. We're just channeling what we know. And without even realizing it, it's just coming up. It's this subconscious that is just coming up through our conscious. And yeah, so the first thing is take a step back. Okay, think, what am I doing to cause this behavior in my child? Because they're not the behavior. As we know from all these years of the intervention work, and you and I have met through the Tony Robbins community. So like watching Tony do it, learning how he does it, doing it like he does it, and then doing it like I like to do it, is like this whole process of realizing that people are not their behavior. We change behaviors all the time. For parents, we need to understand. I wish I have a thing to show how behaviors actually interact with each other, but it's like, with every action, there's a whole series of things that happen in our head as soon as the action happens, how we create meaning from it. But it starts with what emotions that triggers. So when our kids start acting up, the emotions that come up in us immediately could be like all kinds of like inadequacy, frustration, and then turns into anger. And then from anger, it just like, just like in Star Wars, right? Come to the dark side, we take it out sometimes on our kids, and we need to break that pattern. So on the other side of the loop, they're also creating meaning and responding with another action because they're feeling inadequate. They're feeling that they're not good enough. And parents don't realize that we're, in a sense, we're kind of like superheroes to them, right? We don't do anything. In their eyes, we're doing everything with a specific intention. In their eyes, we're doing everything on purpose. In their eyes, it's always them, not us, right? It's like, what's wrong with, why is my parent coming down on me so hard? They don't understand the intent, and we have to stop thinking that they do.
Felix has dropped some really golden nugget. There is a difference between behavior and identity. And what happens is, as Felix is talking about this infinite eight, this we call a crazy eight in psychology, is that when our kids start feeling inadequate, or they get angry, and the moment the parent would say, "Why are you being so lazy?" or "Why are you angry all the time? Why can't you just be like somebody else?" We start comparing with your cousins, with your friends, or your neighbors, whoever. They start forming this identity. And what happened is the exact behavior we don't want to reinforce, we are reinforcing, because that forms our identity. Kid comes back and says, "Oh, I am this bad kid. Oh, I am lazy. I can't learn fast enough. I have this disability." And they form this thing, and it just goes into the perpetual loop and goes this whole downward spiral circle.
Yeah, and obviously this happens everywhere, right? This loop happens everywhere. It's not just parent to kid, it's in the office, it's in relationships, it's in family relationships, the person you love the most, but the spiral will also go up. If you think about it from a country standpoint, the US and England were the worst of enemies back in the late 1700s, the early 1800s, right? How did they become best of friends? Because one party, as soon as they discovered that there's this loop happening, the one with more awareness has to stop reacting the same way. Behaviors feed on each other. And if they feed on each other, then one party, as soon as they stop, the other party will continue to try. At some point, they'll realize that that behavior is no longer working subconsciously, and they'll just try another behavior. And so if we keep ourselves from becoming frustrated, if we keep ourselves from becoming angry, like the triggers that happen that cause us to respond that way, if we realize what they are and we stop it, then everything opens. Then the opportunity for growth happens. The opportunity for the healing, the opportunity for people not doing those behaviors. It just stops it from happening.
Yeah, and it starts with level one, which is awareness, that we are getting sucked into this trigger, like this infinite going back and forth. And, oftentimes as parents are like, "Oh, this is so frustrating. Like, I don't want to do this." And a little voice back in my head, from Tony's training is, he always says, leaders goes first.
Yeah, for sure.
So obviously in this case, this is your kid, they're much younger. They don't have the level of awareness that we have. So therefore, we are the leaders, we are the parents. So leaders go first.
Lead from abundance, right? Don't lead from scarcity. From scarcity, we get frustrated and angry really quickly. Everything starts with us. When our kids are acting up, it's us, not them. And that's the first thing that we have to grab onto, is that, okay, what is our part of the responsibility? So an example is lying, right? So I've been in executive search for 20 plus years. There's a big study out there that says 81% of people lie in interviews. And it's a huge study, and it's true. I've interviewed 10,000 people, right? So I recognize that people are always, may not be doing it on purpose. They're exaggerating. They want to get the job. When I ask further questions, it just kind of busts their whole statement. Now, where does this come from? It comes from parents punishing their kids for telling the truth. But for me, just telling people that, look, parents, if your kids tell you the truth, you need to reward them for the truth, right? If you want any behavior to continue forward, you need to reward it. Now, you can also punish the other behavior, and that's fine. You can attach some pain to that behavior. You must first reward the truth. Most parents don't do this. Oh, my kid said, oh yeah, I'm the one who broke it. Okay, you're going to your room, you're grounded for a week, no iPhone, no computer, whatever it is. And then, it's like, okay, now they link, I told the truth and here's pain, right? You told the truth. Okay, you get this. What you did there was not right. So you decide what the punishment is, right? And then it'll be, when you put it actually in their hands, you'll actually be surprised what comes up. So that's where it starts, right? That's one simple thing that parents, are you doing?
Yeah, that's a very common mistake. And I'm glad you brought that point up. We do talk a lot about lying. And to add on to what you're saying is when we punish, all we're really doing is make them more effective and better liars.
Right.
Yeah, think about the logic.
Yeah, and it's just same for adults, right? If we do something that ends up in pain, we're going to avoid it. That's psychology 101, pain and pleasure. We avoid pain, we'll move toward pleasure. And if we connect pain to telling the truth, it's just like rewarding a child if they fall down. They look around first, and then they notice somebody, and they start crying. They weren't crying before, but they started crying, right? And so they want the attention. If we give them the attention right there, then rewarding that behavior. If we get them to a place where they're neutral and then give them the attention, then at least that's a starting point of, okay, pain does not equal love. And then we wonder why later on in life, as we as adults are going after these relationships that always end up in pain. It's because we're actually wired and we don't even realize it's happening.
Yeah, and that's how trauma is starting to form inside our head. Can you share with us your experience growing up? I believe at some point you mentioned you had very strict parents.
Yeah, so they were really strict with my brother.
You got lucky.
4 years ahead of me, right? So by seeing what happened with him, he was a straight A student, it was like in 9th grade or something, or maybe 10th grade, he brought home a D or an F. And my parents were always like, you need to be a leader, you need to be a leader. That's what they're telling him the whole time. And they're like, he's falling into the wrong crowd. The stress was enormous, right? So the screaming in my house was crazy to that point. Now, I didn't understand any of this. All I understood was don't go too high, because if you go low at one point, you're going to get screamed at. I never got straight A's. I was a straight B student, and I was just under the radar the whole time. What always got me straight B's was I didn't like doing homework. I always did well on tests, but I just did not want to do the homework. It was pretty funny, all the way through college, straight B's. It was all because my parents were screaming at my brother for him getting that D. And then the next thing is they moved us from across the country, from Virginia to Los Angeles in his junior year, to get him away from the people they thought were a bad influence on him. That could be a really great thing. I wasn't aware enough at the time, because I know he was hanging around with some people that, may not have been the greatest characters. There were some that were amazing, and there were others that were very questionable. At the same time, that was a very drastic thing to do to any junior in high school, right? You have to start in your senior year, no friends. So there were some really good things that happened from it, for sure. To make a long story short, my brother, after 10 years of a lot of pain, suffering, he ended up doing something that was really incredible in his life. So it's never too late, but we can always do better as parents before.
As you're telling the story, I remember part of that story was one day, brother and your parents got into this shouting match, and then he went upstairs, he took some kind of weapon and then started
he kicked holes in the wall. He had a wooden chair in his room, and he used a machete and just chopped that chair to pieces, chopped the back of his door. It was the only way he could get released. It was just a constant, you're not good enough. In fact, there's a part of me that wonders if he actually didn't do well in that class just to see what my parents would do. And my parents failed tremendously. And it was unfortunate, in the middle of all this anger. My brother was a straight A student. He scored the highest on his SAT in his high school. He was a National Merit Scholar, got into UCLA, and in the first year, he failed. Of course, then it got even worse. It was all a compounding of everything my parents wanted for him and how they parented him, I think, at the same time. It was pretty awful to see. In the middle of all that, my dad died. So my brother had no way to reconcile it while he was alive. He carried on a God hates me, belief in his head. Why would you let all this happen to me in my lifetime kind of thing? That's why he was lost for a long time. And then fortunately he recovered. Humans are not weak. All humans are extremely strong. It's just whether we guide them in the right direction is the most important thing. Early.
And as you're talking about this, it goes back to our previous conversation about the identity and behavior, that the inner loop coming back and forth.